there was very big news, sad news earlier this week that CJ Baxter will be out for the season with a knee injury. Joe Cook from Inside Texas joins us. Joe, Texas obviously had high expectations for CJ Baxter. He's a freshman last year. He was the one who stepped in, when somebody else got hurt last year. What happens now?
Yeah, it's kind of a same story all over again. Jaden Blue is going to become the number one. I think entering the season, there's an expectation that Baxter and Blue would be 1A and 1B. And now Blue is going to be that number one, 6 foot, maybe a little bit shorter than that, 200 pounds, but extremely fast. Someone who, if you go to, I think it's R Analytics on Twitter, they always do the thing where they check clock miles per hour. On that 69-yard run against Texas Tech, I think he was almost to 23. So someone who's got a lot of speed, someone who can run between the tackles, isn't like a gadget guy, isn't like a speed back. He'll have to do everything, and he had to do that last year against Iowa State to ice a football game. Was a big part of Texas and their college football playoff game plan. The real question is now when you think about the running back position at Texas, you're going to need more than one. We saw that last year. We're seeing that already through one day of full padded practice. That's when that injury to Baxter occurred. And the candidates are Trey Wisner, a sophomore from DeSoto, Jarek Gibson, a true freshman from IMG Academy, and Christian Clark, a true freshman from the Phoenix area. So this is why, days like the other day are why Tashard Choice recruits 2 running backs every single cycle. They have 2 committed in this 2025 class. They're going to probably take 2 in the 2026 class. It's just what he does. And, when you go to a position that asks a lot, physically and schematically, you need to have a lot of different guys available to you. And so this is going to be a test of that depth, but Jaden Blue is going to probably become the guy who gets more carries now as a result of Baxter going down.
Yeah, it is, especially in Steve Sarkisian's offense, because they're going to throw those guys out of the backfield too. They're going to do a lot with them, but it is interesting. It almost feels like you need 3 or 4 in this era of college football because, like you said, you can have the catastrophic thing that happens this week, but you could also have the week-to-week banged up, lose a guy for a couple weeks, and that's how we saw CJ Baxter and Jaden Blue so much last year.
Yeah, and I mean, when Jonathan Brooks went down, that was a little bit of a surprise too. So because just CJ Baxter, he was, I think, a friend Danny Davis over at the Statesman found this, the first true freshman running back to start his first career game at Texas since Ricky Williams in '95.
Wow.
He got banged up in the Rice game, got banged up in the Alabama game. Jonathan Brooks took his opportunity and then obviously became RB1 in the draft. So they've had high expectations for Baxter. It's just unfortunate now we won't be able to see him this year. And even Steve Sarkisian lamented, you're losing a guy, like you're losing someone who everybody in that locker room really likes. I even wrote about him, I think, a couple weeks ago, just at the fact that he seems really comfortable. Like he has that type of personality and persona that you think, wow, everybody's going to look at Quinn Ewers as being the face of the program. But this is somebody who could eventually be that, recognizable face of the Burnt Orange football team. And it's unfortunate we're not going to be able to see him this year. But, Texas has recruited really well over the past couple of years. Running back position is no different. There's a lot of weapons on that offense. But Baxter's still a loss, no doubt.
So question about the rest of the offense, because there's some transfers that we've been talking about and their fit at Texas. Cody Blair and I did a show where we were talking about the most impactful transfers this year. And we both thought Isaiah Bond and Amari Niblack, who came over from Alabama, just kind of fit perfectly into what Texas needed, especially Niblack kind of filling that Jatavian Sanders role. How have they looked in camp so far?
Yeah, Isaiah Bond has been obviously first team guy, kind of at that boundary wide receiver position, someone who brings a lot of speed. They don't think He may not be running a 4.21 at the combine, but they think he can fill that similar role to Xavier Worthy and do a lot of different things. Nyblack, there's some good competition at the tight end spot. Gunnar Helm is kind of perceived as that first guy, but he's the one that you put in line most of the time. Nyblack's guy who maybe you have offset. That's what Jatavian Sanders did a good amount of last year. But he's he's looked good. But there's a senior who really hasn't done a lot in his career named Juan Davis from the Fort Worth area. And he drew a lot of praise from Jeff Banks and Steve Sarkisian for playing with a little bit more physicality than they had seen in recent years. So there's a good competition there at tight end. With receiver, though, specifically, Bond has his days, but every receiver at Texas seems to be having one of their days. Eric Naleen had some info on Inside Texas the other day about how it was DeAndre Moore, a sophomore from, I think, St. John Bosco. He had his day. Silas Bolden, the Oregon State transfer, who I've compared to Jakeem Grant, the old Texas Tech wide receiver. He's had a lot of really good days. So narrowing down that rotation that Steve Sarkisian has said is going to expand, finding the top, I guess, 5 guys you want to work with for this 2024 season, it's becoming a little bit of a chore, but in a good way, just because each receiver seems to be having a really good day at practice.
And one you didn't mention that I know the chat will kill me if I don't ask about, Ryan Wingo, because we were at SEC Media Days, like Luther Burden, he's shouting out Ryan Wingo. Obviously, they're both Missouri guys, but Quinn Ewers singing Ryan Wingo's praises. How much of an impact has this guy made right off the bat?
Yeah, he was the talk of the offense during the spring, just because Silas Bolden was still finishing up at Oregon State, and he shows up and rolls early and just, steals the show. He's someone who's probably, I think, height and weight wise, maybe the biggest receiver on the team at like 6'2.5", 210. Really good body control, right amount of speed for a Steve Sarkisian offense, and just making plays. Right now, we get a little bit of a media window during practice. He's been with the twos, but again, this is a rotation or a receiver room rather that's going to have to figure out how to get the best 3 on the field from a group of 5 guys, and he's definitely within that group of 5. So he's a really exciting player because he's doing a lot of work with the twos. He's been a favorite target of Arch Manning's throughout spring, summer, and fall, as we've heard, but also growing rapport and chemistry with Quinn Ewers as well, to where we expect Wingo to get a good amount of playing time.
Look at Joe, just tweaking that YouTube algorithm a little bit. Arch Manning, Ryan Wingo, Arch Manning, Ryan Wingo. I'm just say it over and over again and let the AI take it and just push it into everybody's feed. But it is fun to think about. And it's also interesting to think about, Joe, because these guys play Michigan week 2. Michigan's going to have an incredible defense. Everybody talks about Will Johnson, maybe the best corner in the country. So, yeah, we're going to find out who Texas's wide receiver 1 is, because it's going to be whoever Michigan sticks Will Johnson on. Like whatever Texas thinks about those guys, I'm more concerned. Like who does Michigan worry about the most in week 2? That will be very telling. Like who do they stick Will Johnson on?
Yeah, is that someone that you're willing to put on an island against people like Isaiah Bond, like Jonte Cook, even like Silas Bolden? And I mean, I would be pretty surprised if Sharon Moore and Wink Martindale weren't that confident in Johnson, just because of the quality of player he is. But it's going to be a fun battle to check out. I think there's a lot of different dynamics with that game. Obviously, it's still just under a month away, but Michigan quarterback battle, Texas O-line versus Michigan D-line, like all the different things going into that game. Sharon Moore being a former Sooner offensive lineman. Like there's so many different storylines that we get to talk about. And but yeah, what the receivers and how we talk about it with basketball and teams building basically entire rosters from the transfer portal. A lot of that was done with this Texas wide receiver room. There is only one ball. I hate that phrase sometimes, but sometimes it's applicable. How do you make it all work? And how do you get that chemistry together, even with some of these new wide receivers?
Well, I think in a week like this, where you have a bad injury, the only one ball thing makes more sense because, look, something may happen. You may need all of these guys at some point to contribute. I want to flip the other side of the ball. One guy we were talking about a little bit on the show this week was Trey Moore, the transfer from UTSA. This guy had 14 sacks last year in the American. Texas's edge rusher, group was not necessarily the star of the defense last year. It was the interior D line last year, but it feels like you add Trey Moore to what they already had, and you're talking about a very formidable edge group.
Yeah, and man, I've been covering Texas for Inside Texas since about 2016, and this is without a doubt the best edge group I've been able to watch on the 40 acres, and it's taken a while for it to get there. You think about that defense that under Tom Herman that Todd Orlando ran with basically 3 defensive tackles and no edges on the field. Well, that has an effect on recruiting to where really primetime players, think of someone like Kaylavon Chason. He's from the Houston area, goes to LSU as part of that national championship team because he looks around and sees, man, my position isn't playing a whole lot. Joseph Osai had that standout 2020, was an All-American and became a high draft pick. That was kind of the blip on the radar. They had tried to make him work at middle linebacker the year before because they didn't use that position. Like it's just, and then when Steve Sarkisian shows up, he brings Ben Davis, Ovia Gofo, Ray Thornton, like 3 guys who I don't want to say they washed off other rosters, but they weren't first string players where they were at to revitalize that position. It's taken a lot of work to get to where it's at. And now they have some older players, developed players really starting to make some moves. And then you add in Trey Moore, who's really cemented himself on that boundary edge position. Baron Sorrell is probably going to be the starter opposite him at the strong side. For some reason, for a team that's going to be in the top 5, Bruce Feldman, and I respect the hell out of his list, but he's only found 2 freaks on the Texas roster in the past 2 editions of the freaks list, and Sorrell was one of them. Byron Murphy was one last year.
Yep.
But they have depth. They feel good about Ethan Burke. They feel good about Colin Simmons, the 5-star. Colton Vosick is a local product. Like they feel like this edge room is the best since Steve Sarkisian's best that Steve Sarkisian's had since he arrived at Texas. And I also think it's easily the best one I've seen since 2016, year 3 of Charlie Strong.
Well, so they also would use Anthony Hill occasionally in a rushing role. Do you think we'll see that, or are they so deep that he just kind of stays back in the second level?
They're going to put him in a lot of different places. He's going to be the middle linebacker. That's the role he's been training for, taking over for Jalen Ford, who I believe got drafted by the Saints. But that's a position that asks a little bit more of pass coverage, playing to the field a little bit more. Pete Kwiatkowski, I'm paraphrasing. He said the other day when he was talking with Anthony Hill, who is also going to wear the green dot, he said, you're a pretty good football player, but you weren't that good of a linebacker last year. Now he feels like he's a lot better linebacker, will be able to do stuff in the middle, reading and reacting and dropping, but they would be foolish to not use him a little bit off the edge and use him in situations where he can really put his 5-star athleticism on display.
Yeah, it's just sort of shades of Harold. But like when I hear that, I get the little look at what happened to Harold Perkins situation. But you realize that's going to be different for everybody. Maybe different for Harold Perkins this year at LSU. But yeah, because I remember when Ford would line up on the edge last year, it was like, uh-oh, a quarterback's in trouble. So that's the one I am curious about, because you're right. They do need him. I'm sorry, Hill, not Ford. But they do need Hill to replace Ford there. So that's going to be very interesting to watch. I was watching your show that you do with Ian Boyd, the Inside Texas Live, on Thursday, and y'all were talking about, the SEC's talking about doing these injury reports and availability reports similar to what the NFL does. It's adjusting to how common sports gambling is now. And this is an interesting week to talk about that with you guys, because you saw the reports about CJ Baxter trickle out. The school didn't acknowledge it for, I think, about a day. If that's a game week, how do you think that's going to get handled at a lot of SEC schools in the age of availability reports, which seem to be coming, according to Greg Sankey.
Yeah, I guess there's the devil's in the details a little bit, because with the Big Ten, it's not released till Friday, right? Or the day before the game, or game day. And I know in the NFL, they base questionable, doubtful all on practice reps. I have a feeling SEC head coaches aren't really going to want to tell, how many reps somebody took, but they may not have a choice. That's kind of where we're going with this as well. And I think Steve Sarkisian, he got asked about this at SEC spring meetings. He got asked about it again the other day. And it's like, how do you make sure that, nobody tries to go around the rules or tries to, play with the availability reports and just says, fine us, take money out of our pocket. That's a good way to prevent us from trying to undo this. And I think, that's a pretty good strategy. It's weird talking gambling in Texas a little bit, just because, legalized sports gambling isn't legal in the state of Texas. You have to go to, I think, literally any state touching Texas in order to, get one of your apps out. And
there's a thriving industry right across the Red River.
Yeah, or
to the north. I know that.
Or or the Mountain Time Zone. Like, basically everywhere else you can go, but not somewhere within the state. But I remember a couple of years ago when the Iowa and Iowa State thing was just coming out, and the women's basketball coach at Texas, Vic Schaefer, I asked him about it, and he had a really good line. He said, as soon as you put on a burnt orange uniform, like, you're on the board in Las Vegas. And so I like this idea of not just for, coaches and players to protect them and make sure that, they don't step in something they don't need to step in. I do like the idea of this as just, informing the fans. Like, let's kind of have an understanding of who's going to be out there, and not have coaches be like, well, we'll see how he looks in practice. And, when you say we'll see how he looks in practice, but he's, in shorts and a t-shirt and doesn't even have a helmet, that doesn't irk me, but, like, I'd rather just be upfront about it. You're still going to have people, at 3 a.m. like they are on Sunday morning, breaking the news for whether players are going to be available or not. But I like this idea. I think if you ask any of the Big Ten people, it seems like it's worked pretty well for football and basketball. I like it there, and I think it helps the sport, and secondary effects helps other industries that don't need a ton of help either.
Well, and it also takes some of the people, because remember, at all these schools, there are students that help out the various, like the students that help out the training staff. They're in a fairly compromised position here, because they probably have information that's very valuable to the gamblers, and they're not being compensated in a way that if they lost this gig, like, they're done forever, or they lose their livelihood. So they are potentially vulnerable. So if you do put that information out, it makes it easier for them. It also, for the players themselves. But it'll be interesting to see how they actually handle it. Because I remember when the ACC did this a few years ago, the coaches they're like, no, we're not giving you anything. And I always thought Nick Saban had an interesting way to do. Like, if a guy might play, Nick Saban was pretty cagey about information. But if the person was out, like, either for the season or for an extended period of time, he'd be like, here's the injury, here's how long he's out. And they seem to win a lot of games there. So it seemed to work for them. Okay.
Well, you know who Steve Sarkisian used to work for. So
that's right.
A lot of similar applications over in Austin as he did in Tuscaloosa.
Hey, he seems to be one of the ones who's taken the right lessons from Nick Saban. It's interesting that the guys who used to work for Saban, some of them took the right lessons, some of them, cough, cough, Jeremy Pruitt, cough, cough, did not. So with Sark, he definitely seems to have figured out, okay, this is the roster building piece of it. This is the management piece, the week to week management piece of it. And yeah, I think that's why we're so excited about what Texas can be, because it did seem like they finally got over that hump last season, started winning the games they were supposed to win instead of dropping them. Do you think that's something that, can continue as they move into the SEC?
I really do. I actually talked about this with our buddy JD Piquel the other day, and I think he may have mentioned it too, in that he talked with Jahdae Barron. You may have done it too at SEC Media Days, and the reaction that everybody has kind of gotten from Jahdae when talking like, "Oh, so are y'all excited for this year and building off what was a successful season last year?" Barron, who came back for his 5th year, goes like, "I mean, we didn't get what we wanted last year. They won the Big 12. They won 12 games. They made the playoff, but they remember that ball falling incomplete on the, whatever end zone that was in the
Mhm.
Superdome. Like they thought they were good enough to play for and possibly win a national championship. And if you make the playoff, yeah, you're that good. But they expect to be there. That's what the mentality in this program is. And a few years ago, the mentality of this program was, boy, I hope we make the Big 12 championship game. So it's a lot different. They feel like they have the right mentality to approach things. Obviously, the players with those recruiting classes and portal are doing great things, and then you combine that with Steve Sarkisian, the play caller, doing some innovative stuff on offense, and the Longhorns feel like they're the force to be reckoned with. Not much of a newcomer, and they really want to make it known that they expect to be in the playoff, probably competing for the bye in the SEC championship or a high seed in a home game and playing into January. Because you hear Steve Sarkisian talk about, okay, if we're going to play this many games, here's what we have to do. That just shows that he's planning on being able to play deep into January. So there's a mentality shift that's happened at Texas to where they feel as if this is where they're at now. They're in this elite station of the sport, and they want to continue to prove it on a year-over-year basis now.
And we will find out if Texas is indeed, I'm not even going to use the B word. They're fine. They're good.
We still haven't. We'll let the people decide.
Yeah. That it's completely subjective. I don't even know what back means. Joe Cook, Inside Texas. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.